straight into my eyes here. I understand that you wanted to make a short statement to begin with.
It might be helpful to the committee because we put down a written parliamentary statement for Parliament only half an hour ago, and just in case members of the committee don't know, I'm able to confirm this morning that the new prison in North Wales will be operated by Her Majesty's Prison Service. 34% of the service provision will be outsourced, including the running of the large industrial workshop complex. This new model will bring the public, voluntary and private sector together, working to provide the very best rehabilitative environment to tackle reoffending rates. The decision to allow Her Majesty's Prison Service to operate the prison reflects the success of the prison unit cost programme, which will save £300 million a year from prison budgets by 2015-16 and reduces the unit cost by £2,200 per place. Our estate strategy overall will achieve long-term cost reduction in the prison estate through our policy of new for old. This means replacing uneconomic prison places with modern, fit-for-purpose accommodation at much lower cost. And I note this committee called for more prison capacity in North Wales back in 2007 and 2010. I'm delighted today to be able to confirm how we will provide that for you.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. You've said in the statement that there is a reduction in unit costs of £2,200. Do you know roughly what the actual unit cost therefore is going to be? I gather the average is around about £35,000 a year.
We brought it down to £34,000, which is less than it was. But this is not just about cost reduction, because it will be a better prison, both for the prison officers who work in it and for the prisoners themselves.
Thank you very much. In that case,
how does that compare with the wider prison population? If it's 34k per unit in North Wales?
No, that's actually across the whole of the prison estate in England and Wales. That is the average, obviously much higher for a Cat A, lower for the lower security categories.
The unit at Wrexham, the North Wales prison, will be lower than that. It will be similar to Category C prisons.
And that at the moment, is that right?
It's somewhere between, it's around about £13,000 to £16,000 depending on the prison.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Gitterberg.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, we will be returning to some of the issues surrounding the economic benefits to North Wales from the prison in due course, and I can assure you that there is a genuine welcome to the economic potential of the prison to contribute to the regeneration of parts of North East Wales. But in terms of turning to the prisons in Wales that we currently have, we had a statement from the Chief Inspector of Prisons back in October, which said that the prisons that we currently have in Wales are actually performing better than the prison estate in general. So would either of you like to hazard an opinion as to why the performance of prisons in Wales seems to be ahead of the similar prisons in England?
Well, I would think we have excellent prison officers. I think we have excellent leadership at the governor level, at the senior level within NOMS, not least Sarah Payne on my right. I think they've had a real focus in recent years. And if you look across all the recent scores from the Chief Inspector, the 5 prisons, 4 scores per prison, I noted there were only 2 2s across all of those, which is really a fantastic achievement. But I think that there's been focus, there's been unity of purpose, and we just have a very good working team. I'm sure Sarah will be able to add to that. But.
Yes, the focus is very much on rehabilitation and safety. So there's all the prisons are focused heavily on decency, on really good relationships between staff and offenders, which of course are important. The other thing that works really well, I think, in Wales is the relationships with outside partners. So there's very good stakeholder engagement around certain things. There's a will to innovate. So a number of the prisons, that won't have been reflected in the inspections because those were back in 2013. But in the last year and a half, my experience of being the leader in Wales has been a great willingness to innovate, try new things.
Okay, on the specific issue, because I recognise the Chief Inspector's comments are very positive, but the 2 scores of 2 were actually in relation to the resettlement issue. which is obviously a concern, because the whole point of prison obviously is that people are resettled into the community and hopefully do not offend again. Do you believe that those resettlement scores will have improved over the past 2 years, or is there still an issue in terms of helping prisoners to resettle?
As you probably know, after each inspection, there's an action sort of log that they take forward, and they work on them. And the twos were in Swansea and Cardiff, and both of those prisons have worked hard to increase the sort of activity that prepares for release, increasing the work and so on. We have recently appointed to cover Wales someone who is an expert in learning and skills, and all of these things are about linking up and obviously helping people transition. The other thing that is definitely going to help is the new Through the Gate service, which is going to be provided by Working Links. They've just taken over the Community Rehabilitation Company, and each of those, all of the prisons will have Working Links, with the exception of us, because that is not a resettlement prison. All the other prisons are resettlement prisons. So they will have Working Links present in them, and we are now moving to ensure that in the last 12 weeks of their sentence, Welsh offenders move back to the prison closest to their release address, so that the rehabilitation company can work with them through the gate.
Perhaps if I could just pick out one example of outstandingly good practice on resettlement, I might mention the Clink restaurant just outside Cardiff Prison, actually featured on Sunday on Radio 4 on the food programme. It's just been voted the best restaurant in Cardiff by Restaurant Girls in Cardiff on TripAdvisor. Thoroughly recommend it. I've taken my family for a meal there. But what they do, they start working with prisoners a year or so before the end of their sentence. They carry on mentoring them for up to 18 months afterwards, and their own figures, these aren't MOJ audited figures, but I understand that they believe they have a reoffending rate across all the clinks in the country of around 12%, which is fantastic. So that's a sort of innovation which Sarah has been talking about, which is doing really well.
I'm going to talk specifically about Working Links a bit later, but it might be a good chance now to mention it. And you mentioned Working Links, and they'll be running the Community Rehabilitation Programme in partnership with Innovation Wessex. Yeah. Within that structure, will we be able to protect a sort of distinctiveness about rehabilitation in Wales?
Yes, because they are Working Links won 3 community rehabilitation companies. So Wales is a single community rehabilitation company, and the other 2 lots are Avon, Somerset, Wiltshire and Dorset, and then Devon and Cornwall as well. Sorry, it might be Devon, Cornwall and Dorset, but I can't remember. So they've got the whole of the southwest. The organisation that you mentioned, I believe, is a staff mutual from Cornwall. We don't yet have all the details of the working model, but the specification for Wales was very clear that the Community Rehabilitation Company needed to understand the delivery landscape in Wales and work with Welsh partners and work across the system.
And how will they be working? How will Working Links be working with Welsh prisoners held outside of Wales? Again, that need for a distinctive approach.
Yeah. I mean, on the one of the big innovations that we're doing with the Transforming Rehabilitation Programme is that prisoners will spend the last 12 weeks of their sentence back in their home areas. So what that will mean is that prisoners, Welsh prisoners who spent time in English jails for the last 12 weeks will be back in Welsh prisons, being looked after by the Community Rehabilitation Company that will carry on their probation and supervision when they're in the community. So that's a very positive move for Welsh prisoners, and of course that goes alongside the training already being done in the prisons. We know with the Wales Essential Skills Toolkit, the individual activity plans for prisoners who are kept in Wales anyway.
Just finally for me, when the Prison Reform Trust talk in terms of the Transforming Rehabilitation Programme, and I quote, likely to result in an increase in breach, recall to custody, and the changes will also place a heavy burden on already overstretched budgets. How do you react to that?
I'm saddened to hear them say that. I've got great respect for the Prison Reform Trust. I was with Julian Lyon, their director, at a meeting yesterday. I don't believe that will be the case, because essentially what we're doing, we're taking the very best of the existing public sector expertise, to which we are adding the best that the voluntary and the private sector have to offer. We're providing supervision for a whole group of offenders, the under 12-month group, who were never supervised before anyway, and for whom reoffending rates are already far too high. We're incentivising the providers with a payment by results model. So I think that this gives us the best chance to reduce what have been stubbornly high reoffending rates for a decade or more.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Just to carry on the point about the 12 weeks, bringing people back to the prison nearest to their home for the final 12-week period, which is a move I would naturally welcome. In view of the fact that currently there is no prison in North Wales, what's the nearest prison for those Welsh prisoners?
Portcullis. So large numbers of North Wales offenders are held in Portcullis. Young offenders are held in Stoke Heath, and then the women, not exclusively, but large numbers of women are held in Style, so they're just over the border.
So just quickly, and I'll beg your indulgence, but my understanding is that there has been some difficulty in terms of placing Welsh prisoners and English prisoners onto the work programme in Wales, and indeed there's been a lack of support, because clearly the most important thing when somebody comes out of prison is the opportunity to get into the workforce. Is that still the case because of the issue of devolution? Do we have a problem in terms of placing people in a supportive environment if they are North Wales prisoners?
There are difficulties because of the way the funding has been agreed, but of course the work programme is provided by Working Links in Wales, so my hope is that some of that will start to be ironed out.
But for example, if there's an identification of literacy issues or numeracy issues, I understand that sort of support is not available in the same manner as it would be if they were an English prisoner.
In prison, they are supported in prison, but yes, in prison, all offenders are tested for their literacy and numeracy.
And this is really important, actually, because this is something new which we started in August across England and Wales. We are doing a much more robust screening of prisoners' reading, maths ability in particular. I looked carefully at this when I was in Cardiff Prison recently. And that, we will have the baseline data for all prisoners in a proper format, really for the first time. And that will give us the ability to really track how far we're doing. And that's an issue that I'm very keen to press officials on and make sure that we do make progress on.
Are you confident the records will actually follow the prisoner in a seamless way? Because I think one of the problems has been obviously when people go from prison to prison, appreciate what you said, the records haven't always followed. And that's critical, isn't it, in terms of developing literacy and numeracy strategies?
I believe that we have sorted that, but I'll allow Sarah to go into the detail.
We do try to sort that out so that they take their information with them, because we recognise that it is a waste of resources to continually test people and the same answers come back.
Yeah.
So
it's demoralising.
It is demoralising for the offenders as well. So what we want to do is obviously to continue. So when they come back to the resettlement prison, as if they are in the middle of a reading, writing course, whatever, that we will continue that so that they get as far as they can before they're released. And then the community rehabilitation's role is to help broker continuation of that once they get into the community.
Okay. Just a final question then. Obviously you've spoken quite positively about the experience or the performance of Welsh prisons, but again we do have a significant overcrowding problem in terms of our prisons, ranging I think from 125% to 186% of capacity. Those figures might be slightly out of date, but there's clearly an overcrowding issue. So what steps have been taken to deal with that, with the exception obviously of building a prison in Wrexham?
Well, I mean, I think, providing a new prison with a capacity of 2,106 places goes quite a long way towards that. I mean, I think it is just worth noting that even though there is some crowding within prisons, including Swansea, within Wales, the crowding is actually less than it was a number of years ago. Obviously, we are absolutely accept our duty to provide sufficient prison capacity, which is why not only are we building the new prison in North Wales, we've also built the extra house block at Park Prison in Bridgend as well. So that is a significant increase in prison capacity within Wales, which will help.
And in terms of the figures for Cardiff and Swansea, for example, is there an expectation that those figures will see a reduction? or are we still looking at 150% of capacity moving forward?
Not at the moment. The way the prison population is worked out is that there is what's called certified normal accommodation and then an operational capacity, which is normally above that. And the operational capacity of every prison is signed off by the Deputy Director of Custody for the region. Their role is to ensure that the operational capacity, so the maximum, if you like, is still enables us to run a safe, decent and secure prison. So, for example, prisons, if there are more offenders requiring single cells, then double cells will become single cells, rather than us continue to crowd. So Swansea, for example, often runs quite a long way below operational capacity. This morning, we unlocked 411 in Swansea, and the operational capacity is 455. So you can see that if as long as we ensure that everyone is kept safely, decently, securely, then the operational capacity remains as it is.
Okay, thank you very much. Obviously, we all agree on the importance of education. Minister, could you explain something to me? And that's the issue of books. I mean, first of all, books got banned, and I thought that was a bit unfair. Then I got an explanation from the Justice Minister, which seemed to make sense, i.e. that they can have access to any book they want from the libraries, and they were being used for smuggling weapons, so that made sense. And now, if I read correctly, we seem to have changed our minds again and allowed books to come in. I mean, what's going on?
Right. Unfortunately, we've had the conflation of two issues here. Let me say completely clearly that I am passionate about prisoners being able to read really well, and I think they should have access to the books that they need to prove their literacy and just be able to read generally within prison. Unfortunately, we have a huge issue with contraband and illicit items, much of which is extremely dangerous and can be very injurious to the safety of prisoners as well as prison officers, and that can come in through parcels. So there are two issues. Very good that they read, but we have to control very carefully what comes in. We never banned books. What we said is that we didn't want packages to be sent in from families because, unfortunately, SIM cards, drugs and so on can come in with the packages. There was a court case brought against the Ministry of Justice, which then required us to allow families to send books in as a result of the publicity that the original decision had taken. But I'm pleased to say that actually seems to be working well, and that we've gone to a number of retailers which families can order the books from, and the books are sent direct by the retailer into the prison. So if you like, this gives us some comfort as far as security is concerned, because the family aren't sort of handling the book directly themselves. But this was the order of the court with which we have complied. Okay,
wonderful. That's clear that up. Right, Sian.
I'm going to sort of be asking about women prisoners and young offenders. In Wales, the Coston report recommended in 2007 that we had a unique opportunity really to look at different forms of sentencing for women. I've become increasingly hardline on this, pardon the pun. I'd rather say, I don't like to say women offenders and women prisoners. I prefer to say women who are in conflict with the law, because in my everyday capacity as a Member of Parliament, when I'm dealing with these women, often the sorts of things that women are sent to prison for, in non-payment of fines, drug convictions, alcohol problems, etc., it appears to me that what they need is help, not a custodial sentence. So how far have we got, and why has so little progress been made in those recommendations in the Coston report, that we could be really innovative in Wales, because we have such a small number of women who are in conflict with the law, looking at different forms of custodial sentencing and support?
Well, perhaps I could start, and I'll ask Sarah to add to what I say. I mean, I think what I would say overall is that we have taken huge steps in this Parliament to provide extra capacity within Wales by providing the new prison in North Wales, and indeed significant extra capacity at Bridgend in South Wales, and actually doubling the capacity of the Young Offenders Institution in Bridgend as well, from 32 to 64 places. So for adult prisoners and for young offenders in North Wales and partly in South Wales, we have taken huge steps in this Parliament.
Male offenders?
Correct, no, absolutely. But I think what I would say is, in a time of fiscal difficulty, it's not a bad record. You are quite rightly challenging us and pointing out further things which need to be done, which is absolutely right, and I'm very well aware of the fact that there still is no women's prison within Wales. What we have done, we believe is sensible. We believe that what we have done was the priority, looking at the overall numbers of prisoners and the lack of any capacity in North Wales at all. I believe, having looked carefully at the provision in Style, in Eastwood Park, and looking at the involvement of Welsh third sector organisations, the fact that women are met at the gate by changing lives and actually brought back, looking at the various fairs and the outreach done to women in Eastwood Park, that there is a good level of service and that important help, which you properly mentioned, provided to women prisoners. But I'll ask Sarah just to talk a little bit more about the specific economics of this issue.
Thank you. I think I should sort of declare a personal interest, really, in that I ran a women's charity for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years ago, and I am particularly interested in exploring what we can do in Wales to help women keep away from the criminal justice system. So we have a very good integrated offender management scheme, which includes all offenders in Wales, working with partners. And as part of the Reducing Reoffending Strategy in Wales and that scheme, we have started a Women's Pathfinder, which focused on Cardiff to start with, multi-agency, working, as women come into contact with the criminal justice system, working out what we can do to support them so that we try and help them not progress further into the criminal justice system. We've now appointed, and we've got some funding, the Welsh Government has joined us on this, an accommodation officer who is helping the women find accommodation when they're released from custody, because that's a big issue. We're also working with local authorities, so it's moving beyond Cardiff now, to try and help women not go into custody, because obviously once they lose their homes and if their children go into care, that creates more of a burden on the public purse. In Cardiff itself, there is a women's centre, so we've introduced women-only reporting arrangements on the probation side, and there is a women's centre for disadvantaged women and women offenders, and they go down there and do courses. And I've actually sat in on a couple where they were sort of challenging women's thinking about what they could do, what they should do, how they might deal with anger and so on. And then finally, the probation service in Wales works very closely with Eastwood Park, where the largest number of Welsh women are held, to help prepare them for their release. We have the Changing Lives contract, which collects women at the gate and brings them home. And the probation service in Wales has helped develop sort of programmes within the prison around confidence building and so on and so forth. So we are doing as much as we can. We have very good relationships with partners in Wales, looking at what more we could do to support women offenders. I think the issue is that many of them are quite isolated. You might only have 1 or 2 women offenders from Aberystwyth or so on. So it's about how do you support them in their community. So we have to do that through partners. And the Welsh Community Rehabilitation Company will be the lead community rehabilitation company for the women in Eastwood Park and in Style.
I think I commend all of that, and I've seen a lot of those innovative ideas in action, but I come back at all times to the fact that you have to treat women differently to the male population, prison population. You know, the sorts of offending that women are involved in, the types of sentencing they get. You know, you've touched upon it, Mrs. Payne, they do have a knock-on effect within the wider community. You know, children in care, very, very fewer women, for example, than men actually go back to their original arresting addresses. You know, this has a knock-on effect on the wider family, etc. And I would go so far as to say the prison doesn't work for women. You know, we have this unique opportunity in Wales to establish a new way forward, and I would encourage you to think about that, Minister. And you did touch upon the work that the Welsh Assembly is doing. I'm aware that there have been meetings with ministers there. Could you tell us a little bit about those discussions and what's happening?
Well, I want to come back to the diversion point briefly, if I may, which you quite properly raised to start with. In addition to the pilot in Cardiff, which Sarah mentioned, I'm very pleased to say that there's a £500,000 grant from the Home Office for the diversion scheme, and there are 4 further sites in Newport, Haverfordwest, Merthyr Tydfil and St Asaph, which are also being rolled out on the diversion side. So we are making progress in the areas which you have talked about. I mean, obviously sentencing is a matter for the courts rather than for justice ministers. We quite rightly have an independent judiciary within this country. But in terms of the diversion work, I hope you'll be pleased to see that being rolled out across Wales.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And discussions with the ministers down at the Assembly?
Well, we have good contact. I have met Welsh Assembly ministers. We are in frequent correspondence. Sarah is obviously based within Cardiff and also has very good relations with the Welsh Government. And everything I have seen shows really good partnership working between the Welsh Government, between NOMS in Wales and between the Ministry of Justice. I really don't see a problem. I think everyone is cited, that there's proper advanced consultation, and I see a system that actually is working really well.
So nothing specifically about female, for women who are in conflict with the law?
What we are doing is talking to local partners as part of the Integrated Offender Management scheme, which is really quite broad. It's the local community safety partnerships and others, trying to work with them about how we might resettle people more broadly. We are having very early conversations with officials in the Welsh Government about this.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps just very briefly I could add on domestic abuse, which I think is a subject you mentioned earlier. The NOMS Innovation Fund Third Sector Capacity Building has just given 150,000 to Llamau for a domestic abuse project in Caerphilly as well, which I think is another good example of the sort of work which you are quite probably referring to.
Turning to young people, we've got a really good story with young people. All the things that have been put in place to support and the reducing number of young people who enter into the custodial system, the justice system. It is declining, and I'd really like us to see us achieve that with women as well. And it's reduced the need for secure accommodation. And we've been to see lots of the projects. We met with a few young people, etc. And what's being done to share those experiences and those good practices that are happening in Wales on a wider basis?
Right.
Well, like you, I'm delighted to see that we are locking up many fewer young people than was the case in the past, and that is a tribute to all of those who are working very hard within the youth justice sector. It does mean that those that we do have in custody are often much more challenging to look after, and that certainly presents issues in terms of violence and assaults, and sometimes serious assaults on staff. But I have seen excellent work within young offenders institutions, within secure children's homes, and within secure training centres. Very, very dedicated staff. But it's often, I say, the thing I worry about sometimes is the environment that the young people are going to go back to once they leave our care, actually, because the reoffending rates for young people are the worst in the whole criminal justice system, and that is something that should rightly concern us all.
Okay.
Yes, well, Minister, if I could just turn now to the issue of Wrexham.
Yes.
We've obviously had evidence, and indeed including on our visit to Oakwood, that it's not really so much size, it's the newness of a prison which can sometimes cause problems. And I wonder if you would agree, and I wonder if you could perhaps outline some of the strategies that you would hope to use in Wrexham in order to avoid those types of mistakes.
Right, well, we certainly intend to learn from other new prisons which have been opened, specifically Thameside, Oakwood and Low Moss, HMP Low Moss up in Scotland. So we are determined to learn the lessons from opening those new prisons. One of the things we will do is we will make sure that we have a mix of both experienced prison officers as well as new prison officers. So we have the time with the prison not opening till early 2017 to make sure that our recruitment plans can reflect that. I think the design of the prison will really help us in terms of safety, security, trying to keep drugs out from being thrown over the wall and other sort of contraband items which, you know, can make life very much more dangerous for prisoners as well as prison officers. And I think, as I was saying earlier, I think we have a very good mixture with Her Majesty's Prison Service running the prison, but obviously education and health being provided through the Welsh Assembly government, and the private and voluntary sector getting heavily involved in the industrial workshops. So I am optimistic about the future of this prison. It is a large prison, but I would point out that it's broken down into 3 house blocks, and then further beneath that, really into communities of 88. We know that sort of 90 or so is the sort of optimum number of prisoners in terms of safety and decency, in terms of security, good sort of sight lines and so on, again, which is where our design comes in to help us. So I believe that we will be able to provide a prison that is safe and effective at reducing reoffending, whilst providing good value for money for the taxpayer as well.
Right. Obviously, welcome the workshop plan. I think that sounds marvellous. But there will also be opportunities, I assume, for some prisoners to take up placements outside of the prison. How are your preparations going for that? Because that, again, is going to be on a very large scale for a relatively small town like Wrexham. And again, what particular steps you take to ensure...
I'll let Sarah Payne probably give the bulk of this, but obviously release on temporary licence is obviously an important part of the preparation for release. And I'm absolutely passionate about getting as many employers as possible involved in providing work both within prisons and then providing work to ex-offenders. Indeed, I go so far as to say I think it is a very important part of the corporate responsibility of business to provide work for ex-offenders. We have an excellent employers forum for reducing reoffending. It's chaired by James Timpson. We're always keen to get more companies on board, and please, all of you, when you visit your local companies, please will you help me in trying to achieve that. But I'll let Sarah answer more specifically on Wrexham itself.
The prison is a Category C, predominantly a Category C training prison, which means that typically the offenders will not be going outside regularly. They would be released on temporary licence for resettlement purposes, but they wouldn't be released on a daily basis. That's from the open prisons that happens. So the numbers won't be huge, and they would be, these offenders held elsewhere would be released on temporary licence for resettlement purposes. Back to the local community. So we don't envisage lots and lots of local working out in the way that we have, for example, with Prescoid.
And can I just ask one final question? Obviously, you've chosen for Her Majesty's Prison Service to run this prison. Were there particular reasons why you did that rather than go to the private sector?
Well, we have fantastic expertise within the public sector prison service, and they've also demonstrated through the prison unit cost reduction programme the ability to provide value for money for the taxpayer while providing an excellent service. So that was the reason.
We've got no custodial facilities for children in North Wales. There's no custodial facilities for women in Wales at all. So why is it the priority of ministers here in London to build a super prison in North Wales, where most of the prisoners will come from outside the country?
Well, if you look at the prisoner projection numbers over the next few years, where we need the extra capacity is in the adult male estate. That's unfortunately where the demand is, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we do provide that for the future, so we are always able to provide sufficient prison capacity for those people that the courts send us. But I take your point about women, we've discussed that earlier, and I take your point about children. I just repeat very briefly what I did earlier. We have taken significant steps to provide extra capacity within Wales, if not within those two sectors, which you're quite rightly raising with me.
But you would agree that the super prison is being built in an England and Wales context rather than a Welsh context?
What it will enable us to do, there are around 900 prisoners from North Wales who obviously are not in prison in North Wales at the moment because there is no prison within North Wales. We will be able to get, we believe, at least 700 of those back in North Wales. This very, very significantly increases our ability, to place Welsh prisoners within Welsh prisons, which I'm sure you will agree is a good thing because of rehabilitation and for all the other issues which we have been talking about.
Building on that point, Welsh prisoners, as you say, are widely dispersed at the moment, with over 45%, I think, over the border in England. Is there a good reason to disperse Welsh prisoners when the majority will want to resettle in Wales? And we heard there in evidence that there's going to be a 12-week protocol.
Yes,
is 12 weeks going to be sufficient, do you think, for that vital work?
It should be, yes, it should be, because the thing is, when you're trying to get people housing, they won't promise it weeks and weeks in advance, so you actually need to get people locally, organise interviews if you need to, and also job interviews and things like that. You can do that within that 12-week period. It's I think probably it's optimum, really.
And I just say we've already made very, very good progress at getting Welsh prisoners back into Welsh prisons for the final 12 weeks of their sentence.
And I'm sorry, the figures aren't published, but 45% isn't a figure I recognise. I think it's fewer than that. Certainly at the moment it is.
Thank you, Minister, for what you've said so far. And I want to build up a little on perhaps the conversation you had with Leah Griffiths earlier on. We spent a very interesting day at Oakwood. We all went, and we learned quite a bit ourselves about the difficulties you'd faced. And I think it was fairly open to us that there have been a lot of teething problems. There have been a lot of issues. I don't think you disagree with that. To what extent are you able to make public what those teething problems are, what lessons you might be learning from them, so that everybody can share in, if you like, understanding exactly what changes you're making to avoid those teething problems in Wrexham? Right, well, I'll mention two issues before handing over to Sarah. One thing we've learned is to make sure that the build project and the mobilisation project actually get joined together and aren't run separately, because that's quite important for the actual opening of the prison, to make sure that those two sort of project teams are working together, and that we're very much committed to do at the new North Wales prison. And secondly, the mix of staff, I think, is critical. Obviously, there will be a lot of people new to the prison service, good for employment within North Wales. The extra jobs we'll be providing, I'm sure you would all welcome that. But we obviously want to have experienced officers in there at the start as well, in order to be able to sort of teach the newer prison officers. So those are perhaps two of the key things I would mention, but Sarah will add further detail.
I don't underestimate the challenge of opening a new prison. I was the governor of a new prison back in the 90s, and I was the second governor, but it hadn't been open very long. And there were lots of problems in the sense that when any new big organisation comes into being, there is not a degree of familiarity about how things are done around here, so you have to establish this is how things are going to be done around here. So there will be challenges in managing the new prison. I am the senior responsible owner for the whole project, so the build and the operation will now come together. I'm confident that we can overcome them and run a really, truly rehabilitative environment. These are not so much, some of these reflect, what I'm about to say, reflect lessons learned, but I think it's really important that we get the right, strong leadership from the beginning. So we will carefully select the person who's going to run the prison and their team. The leaders have to be, authentic, visible, values-driven, all the things that you would expect. It's important as well that we have... the Minister has mentioned the units, these living units of 88. The leadership within those units has to be really strong as well, so it's consistent. So, and we will think really carefully about the regime and the operation of the day. Now, the Public Sector Prison Service has a lot of experience in running a lot of prisons, and we know what the regime looks like, what the core day should look like, and it's the benchmarking that we mentioned earlier on that has delivered the efficiencies then and now is a core day in each of the prisons, which is broadly similar. So we know how to do that. We have the wherewithal to test through heat mapping how we are going to run the prison. So we will be looking at that to just check that we've got everything how it should be. The work... Sorry. Heat mapping. It means that you. I'm sorry. It's similar to what the police use. You actually use computer. I'm not IT literate in that, but I know that we can do it, and I'm going to see how it does. Where you run the regime and you work out how many prisoners you've got unlocked, where the staff are, what the staff movements are, so you can map the day through this computer and just check that you've got the right, that everything is as it should be, where the doors are unlocked, and so on. Sorry, I've lost my thread now. I'm sorry.
Never mind. I mean, clearly you're doing quite a lot of work learning lessons,
yes.
Looking at what happened at Oakwood and indeed at other prisons as well.
Yeah.
I mean, is that? I mean, the committee were really interested in that and how it had moved forward and the work that we're doing to perhaps improve the position at Oakwood. I mean, is this going to be published? Is there going to be a formal review that will be published that we can read and we can share in the work that you're doing in terms of reviewing it?
Well, obviously the inspection reports of Oakwood paint very clearly through the recommendations the things that they wanted to see improved, and indeed the most recent inspection, which was published a couple of weeks ago, shows that there's been significant improvements, and that's what you would typically expect with a prison. We are looking very carefully at those. I've been to speak to G4S myself because I want to understand what the issues are. We do know that sometimes when prisons are built, we underestimate the amount of workshop space that's needed. Well, this time we have got lots of workshop space and sports area and so on, to make sure that all of the offenders can be kept purposefully occupied. We've also learnt as well things to do with the design, like zoning and where you put gates and things, because the core build of the new prison in Wrexham has a lot of similarities to the way the buildings are, particularly the living units are constructed in Oakwood. But we know that works reasonably well.
I mean, one issue. I mean, I don't know whether it's anecdotal or not, but I was speaking at Oakwood, and what he said quite cheerfully, well, uncheerfully actually, was that when a new prison is built, prisoners come to that prison from other prisons. And the prisoners they want to remove from other prisons are the troublesome ones. I mean, if anybody's giving trouble, if you're moving a few, then let's get rid of the ones that are causing us problems. And that was thought, I think, perhaps to be a part of Oakwood's problem. Is that something that you're aware of? Is it a reality? Is it something you need to watch for?
Right. I think it's really interesting because everybody in custody can pose problems. And I do think that to some extent, if you're on the receiving end of prisoners, you can sometimes believe that these people have been hand-selected because they are the people who were not getting on well somewhere else. What we are doing, and it's part of one of the work strands within the programme, is when we need to start to put people into the prison, we will have a selection process to make sure that we get people in the right order. So, for example, one of the first lots of people that I would want in there, if I were the governor, is the cleaners. Because the prison's going to have to be clean. So you want people who you can let out of the cell and who can work a little bit unsupervised with a mop and bucket cleaning. And if you've got lots of people who are incredibly troublesome, they're not going to make necessarily good cleaners from the off. So we need to get the mix right. They will be Category C offenders. So to some extent, not held in or deemed to need the amount of supervision that if they were held in more secure conditions. There will be a small remand function. At what point that will open is not yet certain, but it will be there by the end of 2017.
The only other question I wanted to ask really relates to what your discussion with Leah Griffiths earlier, and you talked about the optimum group of 80, I think you called it.
Yes,
that could be the community or whatever. Because one of the issues of very big prisons has always been the size of the units and the inability to give a personal, not service, but a personal attention to individual prisoners. Now, how real is that? I mean, we had a prison governor tell us that he thought the government was veering too much towards an economic solution rather than the right solution by going for blocks of 700. Well, that's
this
fine.
Mr. Lockyer,
yeah,
colleague.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, how real is this? These units of 90? Is it just something on paper? It might be, or is there actually a way of dealing with prison in small groups?
We know that that number of offenders is a good size for a living unit. Yeah. For the amount of staff that you can put in there, the amount of attention that they can give to people. So the prison the design is 3 K-shaped units. So, and there are 4 spurs on each, and each spur has 2 living units. So they're galleried as well. So they're not just flat, they're 2 stories, so there's good visibility. On the ground floor we have easy access cells for people who are less mobile. Those units are absolutely optimum, and indeed when I worked at Pentonville, the wings were more than 400, and they have since reduced them to smaller size to enable better supervision. The staffing benchmark, so the ratio of staff to prisoners, will be the same in Oakwood in this prison as it would be in any other Category C prison.
I've just said that, I mean, each galleried accommodation module is these sort of communities of 88 prisoners are called. They'll each have their own association area. They each have access to an external exercise yard as well, which will also help with the smooth running of the prison.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Thank you. Kit.
Just to follow up on William's questions and also points made by Jonathan, obviously at the moment we have Welsh prisoners spread along amongst the English prisons as things stand. But clearly when Wrexham is built, there is no way in which Wrexham will be dealing just with Welsh prisoners. So therefore, what are the bases on which people will be selected to come to Wrexham? Will it be geography? Will it be the type of prisoner?
Yeah, I think the English prisoners will be predominantly from the northwest, just over the border. I mean, we try as much as possible.
So the geographical issue will be fairly important.
Correct, to keep prisoners as close to their home locations as possible. But within that, we have to look at the category of prison they're sent to. We have to look at the type of treatment, help and support they need. If they're sex offenders, we have some entire prisons specialising in providing sort of treatment and help for sex offenders. So obviously those caveats are there. But having said that, we try and keep prisoners as local as possible.
So by northwest, we also include Liverpool then?
Indeed, we would.
It's a case for the electrification of the line from Wrexham to Liverpool out there.
Right.
But that's another matter entirely. Just on another issue then, just your statement this morning, which is most welcome. But you highlight the value of the prison being £23 million to the local economy on an annual basis, and also the creation of 1,000 jobs. Can you just give the committee a feel as to where those figures are coming from, and on what basis are you making those assumptions?
Well, that's just on the basis of prisons of similar size, which we are running across the UK anyway, and scaling up a bit because the North Wales prison will be larger than the current establishments. But obviously within the public sector prisons we have considerable experience of knowing how many staff we need for each number of prisoners, and we know that the jobs that will create and the value that will put into the local community. I mean, I'm particularly pleased, the 100 apprenticeships, 500 days of work placements, half the labour to build the prison is going to be local, £50 million going to small and medium-sized businesses, 30 million going to local businesses. So we do hope this will be a significant boost for the whole of the North Wales economy as well.
And those type of figures have previously been looked at by somebody like the National Audit Office, I presume?
Yes, I mean these are our best estimates, based on...
Those were the estimates. Those were done by analysts for the business case for the prison in the first place, and we revisited them for the more recent business case about the running of the prison, and it's our best guess.
So clearly, it's not all about economic development, but clearly that is an important element in the North Wales context. To what extent do you share any of the concerns that we heard at Oakwood, where it became apparent that a lot of experienced prison officers had to be recruited from outside of Wales in order to serve that development? Do you think that will be the same issue in North Wales, or is there a specific training programme being developed in order to ensure that as many of the jobs as possible are available to local people?
For both. So for prison officers, now that we know that the public sector is going to run it, it's really important to have a degree of experienced staff there. It's important. Jailcraft is something that you can't just learn overnight, and if you have a lot of inexperienced staff and a lot of experienced offenders, that isn't necessarily a really good mix. So we will look to have a good mix, but we will be looking to recruit prison officers locally, not least because we will want to have some people for who Welsh is their first language. And I don't know how many prison officers there are working across the system at the moment for whom Welsh is their first language. It's certainly in the northwest. I know how many staff we've got in the south whose first language is Welsh. But we want to operate the prisoners bilingually as we possibly can.
So have you any figures in terms of percentages?
No, not yet. No.
That's right.
I think the other thing is that I don't yet know, although there's a few people keep emailing me who actually come from North Wales and would quite like to come back there, who are already prison officers in the system. Yeah. So.
Well, I have constituents who want to work in Wrexham.
I think Sean wanted to come in quickly, and then...
Well, I perhaps maybe the only person who's actually worked in a brand new prison, and you talked about prison craft and jail craft. I mean, I think one of the things that shocked me in Park when I went to Park was when they ramped up, and obviously you start off, you don't just fill the prison immediately, you ramp up gradually, was how every other prison in Britain who had to provide prisoners for Park just took the advantage and got rid of all of their troublemakers. So you ended up with a brand new prison, fabulous facilities, new prison officers, very dedicated, highly trained. But basically what happened was that the prisoners ended up knowing more about the prison service and the system than some of the staff. So how will you mitigate that in the future?
Well, I can assure the committee that is something that is at the forefront of my concerns, and we are going to have to develop the wherewithal to understand who's coming, where they're coming from, what their institutional history is so far, so that we're able to put them in the right place at the right time. And we have to have a proper good mix of
and not all the troublemakers ending up in North Wales, as they did in Park.
The Minister for England and Wales, I mean, I think it is important at a ministerial level that point is taken on board, and that we make sure that the prisons that go on, the ones that we would just cause significant trouble.
Thank you. Gita, do you want to come back? Jonathan then.
15 or
Yeah. Yeah.
The Welsh Language Commissioner told us that provision of Welsh language services across the estate is very weak. Just wondering what you're doing to improve the situation with it, but also with the developments in Wrexham in mind.
Well, we run the Welsh language scheme. All Welsh prisons have fluent Welsh prison officers. There are Welsh language courses available from Learn Direct on the virtual campus. Libraries have Welsh language books. I think we know that on our prison information system of prisoners who prefer to use Welsh as the first or second language, I think there are 84 in total. 56 of those are in prison within Wales, 20 at Park in Bridgend. We have the television translation service. We have Welsh TV channels available within Welsh prisons. Eastwood Park for the Women has a fluent Welsh-speaking member of staff. So we have made considerable efforts, to try and make sure that the Welsh language is fully catered for. I think where we haven't been quite as good as we should have been is just sort of really monitoring how well we're doing with the Welsh language. But that's something we are aware of, and we're taking steps to improve, isn't it, Sarah?
We are. I think it's fair to say we recognise we're on a journey. We know we've got more to do. We now have arrangements so that everyone who comes into prison, they're asked on induction what their preferred language is. I think members of the committee saw that in the prisons we've now got photographs up with the Welsh language speaking staff, so that offenders who want to speak in Welsh are able to link in with them. We are reviewing our scheme. The scheme was launched in May 2013 and it was accepted by the Welsh Language Commissioner. We're reviewing it at the moment and we will continue to do what we can to make improvements. I do think that because NOMS in Wales isn't just about the prisons, it's also about probation as well and community service. Wales Probation had a very good Welsh language scheme and we are sort of taking the learning across that. We're in the process of recruiting somebody who's going to help with us develop this too.
And the Ministry of Justice Welsh Language scheme, the consultation on it closed on the 7th of January. Do you envision it being published prior to the dissolution of Parliament?
Gosh, I'm not sure I'm cited on that, I'm afraid. Could I ask that we write to you, Chair, if that would be acceptable? It's just not information I have at my fingertips, but I will write to you to provide that. I do apologise. Yeah.
And can I ask you, how well do you think the relationship is working between the Ministry of Justice and the Welsh Assembly Government on prison-related issues?
I think very well. I mean, I've had meetings with Welsh Assembly Government ministers. I know NOMS in Wales has a very good relationship with the Welsh Assembly Government, to the extent that I think proposed legislation is sort of shared with NOMS in Wales in advance, the ability to sort of comment. And what I see is a system that is managing to work very well to reflect the different environment within Wales and work within, the Welsh legislative structures.
All the work involved in the reducing reoffending pathways is devolved in Wales. So we make it our business to work really closely and well with our partners, locally and nationally in Wales.
Which leads to an obvious question, which is whether you see any advantages or disadvantages in devolving prisons to the Welsh Assembly.
The Secretary of State for Wales is really clear that this is a matter that needs a lot of discussion, and I understand there's going to be a command paper shortly on it. Beyond that, I can't say.
I think the Secretary of State is very keen that there should be consensus across the sort of political parties within Wales. As Sarah said, there'll be a command paper published shortly. I just note at the moment that there are good relationships. And as you've already heard, the Welsh prisons overall have extremely high scores, as the Chief Inspector told you when he gave evidence.
I sense you don't really want to explore this issue. But,
I think it might be a little bit above my pay grade, Chair.
All right. Well, I'm prepared to let you off the hook, but I'll look around at. To be honest, in that case, we've been here for nearly an hour, Minister Mr. Payne, so thank you all very much indeed, and I will call the meeting to a close. Order.
Thank you.